Hello and welcome to the Lord of the Rings, the living card game. I'm the White Tower Watchman. This video is going to be the first in a series of rules concepts videos that I'm going to do on shadow cards and just about everything that has to do with shadow cards. For the new player, this is kind of a complicated concept because of the way shadow cards work and all the different exceptions and things like that. And when does an enemy get a shadow card, etc. What if it attacks you outside of the normal combat? All those things will be discussed. I'll probably do 2 or 3 videos in this series. In the first video, this one, I will start with some of the basic concepts, and we'll move into some more advanced, sort of rare situations that might come up, advanced mechanics and things like that. So I've got Flight of Moria set up here, just a random quest I picked to illustrate a few examples here. So whenever enemies are engaged with you in the combat phase, we got player 1 here, player 2 here. They're going to get dealt a shadow card in player order and engagement cost order. So player 1, that enemy will get a shadow card at the very beginning of the combat phase, and player 2, there it is. If we had another enemy out here, let's say we had this guy, and he was engaged with player 1, they get dealt shadow cards in engagement cost order. So it would be the 50, highest to lowest, 50, 29, 15. And then if he was over here, this guy would get a first shadow card, he would get the second, he would get the third. So that's the standard operations for the combat phase. That's pretty much pretty simple so far. I think everybody understands that. But then what can happen is a lot of different little exceptions and things like that can happen. So the first player resolves their attacks, we flip a shadow card. Okay, attacking enemy gets plus X. X is the number of players in the game to their attack, so they get plus 2 in this case in a 2-player game. We got 2 decks set up here. Okay, and even though that says when revealed, and you are flipping over the card and looking at it, that's actually revealed as a game mechanic term, and that is referring to cards that are revealed off the top of the encounter deck, not a shadow card. So everything below that skull is the shadow portion. Everything above the skull doesn't even exist as a shadow card. It's just a little bonus card, a bonus to the enemy's attack. If it gets the bonus, it'll be under that little skull symbol. Everything below that is the shadow card. Everything above that doesn't exist when it's a shadow card. Okay, and then resolve the attack. Over here, same thing. And that has no shadow effect, so the entire thing is ignored. If it was a card like, let's say it was a card like this, right here. See how it has no shadow effect but has a when revealed? The whole card is blank. Unless it has a skull with the little shadow thing below it, the boldface shadow print, and an effect, doesn't do anything. Alright? So that's like the most very basic parts of shadow cards. But what I've noticed in a lot of playthrough videos is the tendency is, okay, let's say Goblin attacks, I defend. Okay, shadow card. Okay, he gets X attacks, number of players in the game, that's 2. Plus 2, 4 to her 2 defense, she takes 2 damage. And then what I'll see people do is they'll just go ahead and discard the shadow card right away. I'm going to give you a couple reasons why that's not only not correct from a rule standpoint, but also you might want to hold off on that. So I understand it's probably easier to keep track of who attacked when if you do that. So boom, he attacked, shadow card's discarded. Over here, let's see, attack for 2, he'll defend, we'll have Boromir defend for 2. Shadow card, okay, he attacked, shadow card's discarded. But the rule book says you actually don't discard the shadow cards until the end of the combat phase or if the enemy's destroyed. So whichever comes first, right? So the reason I would hesitate to do those things is one, is just not correct according to the rules as written, but also you have some opportunities here to sort of manipulate the encounter discard pile. So there's a few little rare scenarios where you could actually get cards in the discard pile in the order you'd like. So if you got a bunch of enemies out here, let's say you had 8 enemies and they all attacked you, that's 8 shadow cards. At the end of the combat phase, all those shadow cards would go in the discard pile in the order of the first player's choice. So you could get whatever card you want on the top of that discard pile, and you could play something like Shadow of the Past to move the top card of the encounter discard pile at the top of the encounter deck. Okay? There's a couple exceptions to that, but we're talking about the normal combat framework attacks. They're dealt shadow cards at the beginning of the combat phase in player and engagement cost order. You have an action window, and then you resolve enemy attacks, and then you resolve the player attacks, right? Now, let's say you're getting overwhelmed. Like I said, you got half dozen to 8 enemies on a table. All the shadow cards go off. Or let's say you feint enemies, you thicket of spears a bunch of enemies that can't attack you. When those shadow cards all get discarded at the end of the combat phase, you have a chance as a player to put them in the order you like in the discard pile, and then maybe pull one out with an easy encounter card out with Shadow of the Past, so you see it as your first encounter card next turn, right? The other thing that happens, you can simply kill the enemy. So, like, let's say a character left play this round. Aemir got the +2, so he's attacking for 5. Okay, we defended here, we defended here, and now Aemir is going to go ahead and attack this guy for 5. He's going to do 3 damage. He's got 2 defense. That's enough to destroy him, right? So at this point, it's before the end of the combat phase, both these cards are discarded simultaneously. Okay, but be careful in which order you place them in, because a quest like Flight from Moria can manipulate the encounter discard pile with a card like Chance Encounter. Put the top enemy in the encounter discard pile into play, engage the first player. Okay, so you definitely want to put the shadow card, the troll, on the bottom, because you'd rather see this guy instead of this guy. You never want the troll to be the top enemy in the discard pile. You're trying to dodge that dude. So that's how you'd want to do that. And then at the end of the combat phase, all the other shadow cards would get discarded. Okay. I just very often see on playthroughs, like almost all the time, people will flip the shadow card, resolve the shadow effect, and then discard the shadow card. It's technically not correct if you're going from a strict flow of the cards perspective. And there's a lot of scenarios that can interact with the discard pile. You can with something like Shadow of the Past, or the encounter deck can with something like Chance Encounter. Okay. And then the other example that's really cool is, let's go ahead and clear this out really quick. And I want to load Watcher in the Water really quick. So this is that really hard to find pack, but let's say you're at the last stage of Watcher in the Water and you have to solve the Doors of Durin. Okay? Each player may discard any number of cards from his hand, then discard the top card of the encounter deck. If the first letter of the encounter card title matches that of one of the discarded player cards, add the Doors of Durin to your victorious play. So you solve the riddle you got through the doors. Okay? You have to do that to beat the quest. Otherwise, you have to kill the Watcher, which in my opinion is much harder, at least in progression style. So again, where's that card Shadow of the Past here? Oh, I think I need to sit down to spawn it. So, potentially, if you just had a combat phase and you pay attention to the order that you discarded the shadow cards at the end of the combat phase, you could move a card to the top of the encounter deck that matches the first letter of one of the cards in your hand. So it makes the Doors of Durin very simple to solve. So those two quests in particular, in the second cycle, the Dwara Delph cycle, Flight from Moria and Watcher in the Water, they have some interactions with the discard pile. There's other quests that do it, but just there are reasons where you don't want to discard all your shadow cards until the end of the combat phase. Okay, not right after the attack happens, which I see happen in not like 8 out of 10 playthroughs. People just discard them right away. It's not correct from a rule standpoint. It's also robbing yourself of some opportunities in some quests. Okay, let's talk about the exception to these rules in the next video, and I'll leave a link in the description box to the part 2 to this shadow card series. Alright, thanks for watching. See you next time.